Remember, knowledge, it ain't free. You gotta pay attention and don't believe the hype.
For over 150 years, the Kentucky Derby has stood as the most enduring tradition in American sports. And in our time, one stallion is reshaping its legacy. Back-to-back Derby winners. His first son at stud siring another. A dynasty in motion. A motion that again has forward momentum toward Louisville, with another elite crop of 3-year-olds bearing his genes. Spendthrift Farm, home of Into Mischief.
They're off in the Kentucky Derby.
For some, they say it's the most exciting 2 minutes in sports. For us, it's about potential financial opportunities. Never bring a knife to a gunfight, and make no mistake, big money is up for grabs, and this is a fight. Never settle for second best. The Past the Wire annual Kentucky Derby seminar. Nobody does it better. Preparation is key. Be better prepared, delve deeper, stealth. They won't see us coming and they won't know we're there. Money management, ticket structure, pace, all the intangibles, thoroughgraph, everything that matters to make it count, to have that edge. In the end, if things go as planned, it'll be like we stole the money. Never think about the consequences if it tastes good. There's a lot of ways to handicap a horse race and a lot of ways to bet on it. But nobody that I know does it like Geo Sette and his full card, precise order handicap. Every horse in the race gets a predicted order of finish like only Geo can do, way beyond a deep dive, available exclusively on select days at Past the Wire. This is important, so you're going to want to remember it. If you're a cat and you want to become a lion, you're going to have to lose your taste for rats.
Hey, what do you say to everybody? Geo Sette back at you. Past the Wire TV. I'm really happy that you're with me here tonight. And you know what? I'm happy to be here for you because I'm excited about this upcoming weekend. I mean, think about it. Who is better than us? We have 14 races at Gulfstream Park, highlighted by the Florida Derby. And we have 14 races at Oaklawn Park in Little Rock, Arkansas for the Arkansas Derby. And it just gets hotter and heavier as the weeks go on now, as we head towards the first Friday and the first Saturday in May. So I'm here today to go over the entire field, a Sette deep dive of the Arkansas Derby. All right, which is a 9-horse field, the Grade 1 Arkansas Derby. And of course, as I've been busy all week working on my full card, very detailed, elaborate, very aggressive full card at Gulfstream Park, covering the 10 stakes, 14 race card at Gulfstream Park on Saturday, and that will be available likely by tomorrow evening, Thursday evening, somewhere in the area of 6, 7 o'clock, maybe a couple hours earlier, as I still have not completed my process yet. Okay, so that's just a note. And then coming up next week, all right, as we get to the Bluegrass Stakes, the Santa Anita Derby, and the Wood Memorial. Let me make sure of that. Yeah, that's 4, 5. We're going into April. What I'm going to do, and you'll hear more about this, I'm going to cover those 3 tracks, but I'm going to do a special handicap covering all stakes pick 3 from all 3 of those racetracks, covering the Wood Memorial, the Santa Anita Derby, and the Bluegrass at Keeneland. So A lot of good stuff coming up. All right, so with that said, this is the Arkansas Derby show. Let's just get down to business, and let's break down the field. I'll start off on the rail, and I'll take you all the way to the bottom horse. Much to discuss, and I am very excited about this race because how can we not be? All right, and as always, there's intrigue, and you'll hear everything I have to say about each one of the horses now. All right, so let's get started. All right, let me get comfortable here. I have my form printed out, my notes. That's the way I like to do things. Okay, of course, a lot is stored up here, but I want to keep my references there so I don't forget to make a point that I need to make. All right, I think most of you guys that are fans of Past the Wire TV, you appreciate that. I know you do. The number one is Brereton's Baytown. Okay, so this guy, let's see. Okay, don't have the morning lines yet, but in my opinion, this guy is the complete outsider of the race. He's probably going to be somewhere in the area of 40, 50, or 60 to 1 on the board, and here's why. All right, he is the most experienced in a race, which often is helpful for a horse, especially during their 3-year-old campaign. However, he's clearly cheaper, slower. He hasn't produced, in my opinion, a single wow moment throughout his 10 races so far. And like I said, 10 races is the most any other horse in this race has run. So no wow moments, slower times on the bias scale and through various other measures. He did have a bad post in the Rebel where I felt he was overmatched anyway. So challenged with that bad post, he couldn't give his best effort. I thought it was interesting that this guy began his career in a stakes race at Saratoga in the Tremont. So they were ambitious with him. And in that race was the winner was Studley Do-Right, who went on to win some nice races. But as much as they were optimistic and ambitious about this guy early in his career, debuting in the stakes, he just hasn't made his presence felt, with the exception of running a couple of strong races in the wet. So for some reason, it's wet at Oaklawn. I think there's only like a 10, 15, 20% chance of a shower. And we certainly don't want it to be a wet day because, you know, we want the full day to be as it is. So it's a go. But if it is wet, yeah, this guy would move up somewhat. But I wasn't exaggerating. If I was a morning line maker here, they're probably going to list him at 20 or 30 to 1, but he should probably be on the board in this field somewhere in the area of 40, 50, or 60 to 1, and he's a toss for me. I'd be very surprised if he competed, on any level here because there's this much stronger horses in the race. All right, let's move on from him. The 2 horse is First Division. Now, First Division only has 3 races to his credit, as opposed to the one having 10. All right. This guy did not run as a juvenile. So all 3 of his races have been this year as a 3-year-old. Obviously, the respect is always there for Ken McPeak, who now has a interesting and expected rider change to BJ Hernandez from Julian Leperoux. All right. So consider that a plus, and also consider that this colt has managed to methodically improve with each of his 3 starts. And it's something that's favorable, and you like to see that. So combined with my race review of those 3 races, the fact that he stretched out effectively, and the fact, more important so, he seems to be very fit and developing nicely. And a measure of his 2 workouts. I mean, when you see a horse work in 59-3 breezing, like he did in his last, obviously it's quick work. It's demonstrating that he's fit, and he's likely to go forward in this race. And you know what? The pace dynamic and the way this race is laid out, considering all the horses in the field, it's likely that he's going to get a favorable trip. I think he's made for the distance. I wish he had a few other races under his belt, and I did wish, I'm always in favor for horses on the Kentucky Derby Trail running in races like this, the Arkansas Derby. I would like them to have a race as a juvenile. However, he does not. But it doesn't mean that he's not developing and improving rapidly. So in this field, I gave him a ranking of a horse that should likely move forward. From an exotics point of view, he can't be dismissed entirely. I'm probably going to use him more so. If he gets the trip, I feel he will get, and a solid ride from DJ Hernandez, I'm going to use him more so in the bottom level gimmicks, especially in superfectors. But, race day, I may make a decision to put him on my triple wages, especially if I decide to do a triple key on top of my straight triples, which I like to play, because when I'm right, if I'm precisely right, I want to get paid. I want to get paid on the straight, and I want to get paid in my key. So a contender to run favorably here, potentially hit the board, do some running late. I think he'll make the distance, but it stops right there. I don't think in this spot he's going to be good enough to pull off an upset. All right, let's move on to the number 3. Now, the number 3 is Publisher. Now, I got a lot to talk about this guy because I'm very intrigued by him, and I consider him a contender in this race. He's still a maiden. All right, we know that. Now, Publisher's got 6 starts. He also ran as a juvenile. I like that. He's still a maiden. Doesn't mean he's not developing. It doesn't mean he hasn't run well. And it doesn't mean he didn't impress me, most importantly, in race review. As remember, I study the races with a defined, close eye, and I see things that sometimes other people don't see. So it's a $600,000 son of Triple Crown winner, American Pharaoh, out of a proud Citizens mare. So obviously, the pedigree's there. He was a very expensive yearling purchase. And he's still a maiden, so he hasn't won. So he's been disappointing. But it doesn't mean he's not going to have some quality races as this year materializes. And then when you look at him in this race, do I like the move to blinkers on? Yeah. I love that it's second time Pratt up for Stephen Asmussen. In the Southwest, all right, if you go back and review the race, in my opinion, he ran a very misleading quality race in the Southwest. It was a horrible start. He kept on in a stretch, but overall, in terms of what the game plan was for the horse, it was a bad overall trip. In the Rebel, he also kept to the task at hand. He had a nice run. If you watch the stretch in the Rebel, he had a lot more horse than it appeared to be. He was pinched. He was squeezed some, and his momentum was altered. And I think that cost him a better finish in the race. No doubt it stopped his momentum. So if you want to see that for yourself, go back to the race, go back to the Rebel. Okay. So taking that a fact that this is his third race at 3, and in the 2 races that he's run this year as a 3-year-old, remember, he's bigger and he's stronger. You can make an argument that he had challenges and it wasn't really fair to him. Was he the best horse? No. Could he finish better? Yeah. So as much as I really trust Flavien Prat in the saddle, and you got to have a lot of respect for Stephen Asmussen, blinkers on in this spot, I see Publisher as a contender here. And if it's wet out, he graduated in the mud and he ran a big number that day. But overall, his numbers, granted, 0 for 6, but he's hit the board 4 out of 6. His numbers, especially if he moves forward, and especially if he gets a clean trip and a careful, intelligent ride from Flavien Prat, he could be a force in this race. I wouldn't even rule out him pulling off an upset. Do I like others a little more? Yeah, but you'll know at the conclusion of discussing all 9 horses what my precise order is. But he's a contender in my eyes, even though he's still a maiden in this race. All right, let's move on to the 4. 4 is Best Friend Rocket. All right, now, since I don't have access to the morning lines, I'm gathering that this guy's got to be somewhere in the area of 15, 20, 25 to 1. Nice looking colt, also developing, ran as a juvenile. I like that it's second time Nick Juarez, who on a previous show I talked about Nick Juarez. Good, confident rider. I know a lot about him from my hundreds of visits here down the Jersey Shore to Monmouth Park. Nick Juarez at one time was one of the leading riders there. And I knew him to be a very confident guy. So he's getting mounts like this in big races. So it's second time Nick Juarez. This, of course, is a $575,000 yearling purchase. Son of Curlin. So, this horse is not a bag of shells. This is somebody who was purchased at a big number. And when you're a son of Curlin, there is a lot of ambition for him to have a promising career. So now he's making his second start as a 3-year-old. And in my eyes, in race review, he's noticeably stronger and noticeably faster. And if you look at the bias scale, which I follow, in his last tree, he's gone from a 57 to a 74 to an 82. And he's probably shown improvement on the other scales as well. His last, the $200,000 optional claimer, very impressive. Watch it. He was very game, and it was over this oak lawn strip, which again is a favorable advantage because he ran his best race over the same track. This guy was formerly with trainer Brittany Russell, now, of course, with the coach, Dwayne Lucas. And, Lucas has done some special things in recent memory over the last couple of years. We know he won last year's Preakness and so on. And, I don't like him as a bigger threat to win this race, but I have him as a horse that could hit the board at a nice price and fill your superfecta or triple really well. He should stretch out well. I don't have any reservations about this guy going 9 furlongs. His daddy is Curlin. What was Curlin? 2-time horse of the year, built for the distance. So don't have any reservations about the distance with that guy. He's also well-traveled, all right? When I look at my notes, and, John had made this point where it's so important to not just look at his last couple, but, go through the lifespan of his campaign. In this case, as a juvenile, and here in his 3-year-old campaign. So he's only making his second start as a 3-year-old. And his first start was good over this track. But I like the fact that he's traveled. All right? Saratoga, Aqueduct, Laurel, and now Oakland Park. So when a horse travels well and runs well and shows that improvement, he's a racehorse because he's running over different surfaces. Like I said, in the beginning, clearly as a juvenile, he wasn't that fast, but he's been improving. And I wouldn't be shocked if he took another step forward in this race. Like I said, I don't think he's good enough in this spot to win, but he's not a toss off all your tickets like the one is. The one, in my opinion, it's not just because he's going to be 40, 50, or 60 to 1 odds, but you could just might as well shorten the field from 9 to 8 by eliminating the one, because in all due respect, he just doesn't. It would be a surprise if he hit the board here to me. All right. Let's move on to the 5 Speed King. Now, interestingly enough, got to turn the page to my notes. All right, Speed King, another horse who, if I was the morning line maker, I'd probably put him in somewhere in the area of 12, 15 to 1. He wouldn't be single digit, but he wouldn't be a long shot. And there's a possibility that this guy, who's demonstrated some talent, he could be an overlay on the board. But here's why I'm a little suspect, and I have some reservations about Speed King. All right? Clearly mixed singles. Speedy, for sure. So he lives by his name, Speed King. So he's fast. He's not as fast as some of the others, but he's got nice speed. He was improving nicely. But then, when you look at the grade 2 Rebel, his last, it just seemed that he was flat. I didn't find much of an excuse. Yeah, he didn't have the best of trips, but in that race, obviously he's beaten by two of his opponents here. He was clearly beat by a better horse, Coal Battle. And, Sandman was in the race too, and he beat him. So this guy ran twice as a juvenile and now twice as a 3-year-old. Good-looking horse, and I do like the fact, because you got to consider how a horse is training. I do like the fact that his last 2 works for this race on this surface were really sharp. So with that, you got to think that maybe he's going to be improved from his last. But even if he improves, I don't think he's good enough, or he doesn't have that body of work that has demonstrated that he could boss this field. So, and then you have to ask yourself a question. Does he want 9 furlongs? Is this guy a 1 1/8 horse? Pedigree says, maybe more so a mile. Now, obviously, he won at 1 1/16 in the Southwest, but a lot of things worked out for him that day. I'm just not sure going 1 1/8 is his best distance. If he proves me otherwise, then he does. But again, you have to paint a picture of how you feel the whole race will unfold. Now, there's no doubt in my mind the connections are going to send this guy, and he's got speed. So that race, the first quarter, the race to the first turn, is going to be compelling. That is why I feel this race is going to produce a high-level moderate to fast pace, because Speed King's going to go. And we're going to talk about a lot of other speed in the race, but Speed King's going to go. And even another horse I spoke about, Publisher, don't be surprised if Flavien Prat doesn't have him on the lead, but he's much closer than he has been in other races. So that's how I break down Speed King. I think he's going to be part of the pace. I think he's going to be very aggressive out of the gate. He shouldn't have the lead because the bottom horse is just flat out faster than him. But you never know. If he got the lead and Cornucopian was a stalker, it sort of changes the dynamic of the race, but it plays into the plan in terms of how I paint the picture for the final outcome of this Arkansas Derby. All right, let's move on to the 6, Sandman. Horse I am pretty excited about, and who I feel is a major contender in this race, and ultimately who I land on as my top choice. And I have many reasons to discuss here going over Sandman. First things first, bullet points. I love his overall campaign, going 5 races as a juvenile and now making his 3rd start at 3. So he's got 7 races, making his 3rd start at 3, which would be his 8th race. I like that. I like his campaign. If you watch this horse in race review, and like I said, train your eyes. Do so. If you're a capper out there or a horse racing thoroughbred enthusiast and you don't watch races, I implore you to do so, because it is it's a high level, essentially important part to becoming a more seasoned handicapper. Because, DRF, which I use, past performances, thoroughgraph, everything is important in terms of measuring numbers in performance, but there's nothing better than your eyes and what you see. So with this guy, he eats up mounds of ground, long strides in his stretch run. Reminds me greatly of Tapit Trice in ability, running style, and the physicality look. And you know what? Tapit Trice, obviously a Tapit, and this guy, a Tapit as well, truly wants the distance. And if you remember, Tapit Trice, and I thought highly of him going into the Kentucky Derby, and he never did any running in the Kentucky Derby, but later on he shined. Even in the Belmonte Stakes that year, he ran big in the stretch, ate up a lot of ground. But this guy, I think, is further along his ways, greater than Tapit Trice. But it gave me that visual comparison. So he's built for the distance, and he truly wants the distance. I have no reservations at the 1 1/8, and I actually feel like he may be more suitable at a 1 1/4, because when he gets going in the stretch, he just eats up lots of ground. Now they switch over to the red hot and ultra talented Jose Ortiz, who is the runaway rider champ at the fairgrounds. Now remember, winning is contagious. And all due respect to Kristen Torres, who in his mounts, with the exception of the brake calamities, he did his job. But obviously Jose Ortiz and his level of confidence and his level of skill adds to Sandman's appeal, no matter how you slice it. So if you go back to his 2-year-old campaign, he kept significant company. I'm going to name some of the horses that I saw in my race review. As a 2-year-old, he raced against and with Jonathan's Way, Innovator, Sovereignty, who we know a lot about, who's one of my main horses on the Kentucky Derby radar, who I've been on all year. And I'm very happy to say I have 2 really nice future wagers on. So as a 2-year-old running with Jonathan's Way, Innovator, Sovereignty, Tistastic, and Owen Almighty. What do all those guys have in common? They all went on to win and run very effectively in big races. In the Southwest, if you watch the Southwest, an absolutely atrocious break. It wasn't like he just hopped. He hopped and steered, awkwardly left. It was an extremely atrocious break. Then he was wide, but he ran on. And he just ran on. And he gobbled up tons of ground. And that was at 1 1/16. And to boot, look at the fractions. 25-1, 49-1. If you think of the ground that he made up in that race, and I know this has been discussed, but when you visually see it, you're impressed. And then you start to think about him going forward. So what happens in his very next race in the Rebel, he was far back. He kept to the task at hand again. And again, he gobbled up ground. Fractions again were relatively soft, 24, 47-4, 111-4. So they got quicker as the race materialized, but the quarter and a half, the high 47 was almost a 48.5. And in that race, Cole Battle, one of his opponents, who we're going to get to, he ran a very, very strong race. He was sharp. He got a big jump on him, and he was deserving of victory. I didn't have him that day. We're going to get into talking about him, but I feel confident about this gray, Sandman, turning the tables on Cole Battle in this race. Okay? I think I gave you enough of Sandman. Major contender, dangerous, especially if it's a fast pace, heavy, high level, moderate to fast pace, because it's 1 1/8, and he eats up a lot of ground. And you can't count on him having those types of calamity-stricken breaks. Let's move on to the 7. Monet's Magic. Another horse who, by the way, I didn't talk about what I feel my morning line should be on Sandman. I have Sandman at 2-1 or 5-2. And if he's not, I want an investigation done. Because he's got many credentials, which I elaborated on, to be right there in the thick of things, deep in the stretch in this race. Most likely winning. The 7, which I began to talk about, I feel he's an outsider in the race. My morning line on him would be somewhere in the area of 25-1. Knowing they're going to be rather conservative, maybe they're going to list him at 20 or 15. Luann Machado's up for Ben Colebrook. They have a unique relationship together. So he rides for him often, especially over at Turfway Park and at Ellis Park. And here they are in Arkansas. And Machado, if he makes the trip, because the last time Machado was scheduled to ride in one of these Derby preps, he didn't show up. And they had a rider change. But I'm thinking Machado's going to ride here for Ben Colebrook. I do respect the barn. What do I have on him? Son of Good Magic. So Good Magic has been a real good sire to many horses. He was a strong 3-year-old too. If you remember his 3-year-old campaign, I believe he was the one that had to run in to justify all those races. But later on, I was at the Haskell where Good Magic just dominated the field. It was super impressive. And, it was a good, strong 3-year-old. And he's been producing winners often. So this guy's a son of Good Magic. Also comes out of the Southwest, beaten by Speed King, defeated by Sandman. Now, he didn't get the best of trips. So in watching that race, I like that, there's still a level of willingness. I gave him a pass. The fact that he didn't get the best of trips, but he was 44-1. And going forward, graded distance, even though I spoke highly about Good Magic, in this spot, I couldn't make an argument for him. And I'm likely going to toss him like I'm tossing the 1. And if he beats me, he beats me. And I'm talking about not using in my underneath exotics, like my triple and superfecta. If I was going to use him anywhere, it would be on a very deep saver superfecta ticket. Hold on, I got to get a sip of Aqua Frisca. Got to stay hydrated. So, yeah, Luan Machado for Ben Colebrook. It's his boy. He uses him often. He should be coming late if the pace is moderate to fast, likely faster if the pace dynamic develops like I think it will be. But clearly, others are just simply more appealing. And remember, if I use them, it'd be like my saver $2 superfecta or even a 10-cent superfecta key, just so I have some action with him if somebody didn't run as good as I felt he would and he's managed to catch 4th, but it's not likely. Let's go to the last 2 horses who are very intriguing and much to discuss about both of them. All right, so the number 8 here is Cole Battle. Now, hey, I like underdog stories. I like rags to riches stories. I like horses that demonstrate what you need to have is heart. And Cole Battle, winner of 4 straight. Don't you ever underestimate a horse with a nose, even a Sette nose, for the wire. All right. So, and I've learned that a long, long time ago. So, is he deserving to be a horse that's listed as a contender for this race? Absolutely, because he's won 4 straight. He's been improving, and he's found the winner's circle, and he showed some heart. I do like that he ran as a 2-year-old, and he's developed nicely. And he's also been stepping up and winning. So developing, stepping up, winning. But you know what? I had to do another deep dive, and I broke down the fields. Other than the Rebel. The Rebel, big time thumbs up. Upset. Big price. What'd he pay? He was just under 12-1. Paid like $25. Rebel, major thumbs up. Huge effort. However, in the other fields, the 3 races he won before that, to be honest with you, I wasn't entirely impressed with the makeup and the contenders in those races. Vargas for Lonnie Briley is a great racing story. Extremely discounted, very cheap stud fee for this horse, and only $70,000 is a yielding. That's where I get the poor man's or rags to riches story, because if he wins here, and I believe he's already a horse that's headed to the Kentucky Derby, but if he wins the Arkansas Derby, let alone the possibility of winning the Kentucky Derby, That's a big story. All right. He's 2 for 2 over the track. Another favorable advantages. Ran 2 races at Oaklawn. Emerged victorious twice at Oaklawn. But I don't know. Being honest with you here. Originally, I was on both sides of the fence. And then I leaned on one side and I said to myself, I got to consider him somewhat a little more. But then I said to myself, what is his ceiling? And to be honest with you, I don't know at this point if the Rebel was his ceiling. Is he a grade 2 horse with a lot of heart? Is he good enough to pull off his 5th straight victory and win a grade 1 here? And the answer is, I think he's going to get action at the window. He will not be favored in the race. Some people, I couldn't believe that some people thought he was going to be the favorite. Just me doing some observations online. The favorite we're going to get to, that's Bob's horse, Cornucopian. And Sandman is going to get a lot of ink and a lot of action at the window, as he should. I wish he's an overlay. I wish, shockingly, somehow we find him at 4 or 5 to 1, but I got to be realistic as a horse player as to what my expectations are. I'm hoping he isn't an underlay, and he'll never be an underlay in my eyes, but, Sandman could be bet down to, somewhere in the area of 8 to 5 and 9 to 5. It could happen. But Cold Battle, what did he win at? He win at 2 to 1. We're just under 2 to 1, just under 7 to 1, just under 5 to 1, and then just under 12 to 1. So he hasn't been embraced entirely in all these starts. And now here he is in the Arkansas Derby. He's going to have to take a step forward to beat these. And I said to myself, has he reached his ceiling? And I think he could have. I'm sorry to say, for those that like this horse. Would I have a problem with anybody saying, I'm going to be defiant? That's my guy. I'm playing him because he's got heart and he's got a nose for the wire. Yeah, I don't blame you. But you got to pay attention to the entire dynamic of the race, break down the field, study film, race review, recognize the workouts, understand the campaign, and then come to a conclusion. So where do I have him in my full, precise order? I grudgingly listed him 4th. Let me make sure of that. No, he's the 8. Let me see that. It was 4th/5th, somewhere. I like 3 other horses who are more appealing to me in this race. All right. So we'll get into the final precise order. All right. So let's go on to the horse that's got all the noise everybody's talking about, who's the bottom horse in this race, number 9, Cornucopian. All right. Now I don't have much race to talk about, but I have some history to talk about. I want to talk about Bob Baffert. I want to talk about his speed. And I want to elaborate here because I do not land on this guy. But you're going to know by how I elaborate and what I share that obviously the respect is there because he's a very intriguing and a very fast horse. But here we go. First things first, maiden special at Oaklawn Park. Let's see, February 2nd. That makes it, 6-7 weeks ago, somewhere in that area. I'm not a big fan of maiden special to grade 1. I'm just not. Are there exceptions to the rule? Absolutely. Never ran as a juvenile. Don't like. But it's Bob Baffert. Big thumbs up. Very short price, stretching out from 6 panels to 1 1/8. Don't like. And inevitable. Now, if I was the morning line maker, just out of respect, out of what I seen over the track in that one race, the reputation of Bob Baffert, yeah, he's probably going to be the favorite. But I wouldn't put Sandman too far away off of him from a morning line perspective. If I had to take an educated guess, his morning line is going to be somewhere in the area of 8-5, 7-5, something like that. Because remember, the public and the hype has something to do with how they establish what they feel is a competent morning line. So pedigree says yes. However, his experience or lack of is essentially important, and that is quite obvious because he has one race under his belt. Post isn't so bad being on the outside. It's actually favorable to him. Now, look, again, every track is different. If it was at Gulfstream Park and he was the outside horse, he'd still be fast enough to, get to the first turn, but it's easier in this spot. He's got some speed inside of him, but with an alert break, and we're going to get into the rider and some other things I need to talk about. With an alert break, as fast as he showed himself to be on debut, he's likely to have the lead around the first turn. It's not guaranteed, but he's likely to have the lead, maybe even through the first half mile or through the first 3/4 of a mile. Son of Into Mischief, super expensive. How much did he cost? $1,100,000 as a yearling. Expectations very high. He put on a show in debut. There's no doubt over this track. However, how good was that field? How good was it? Did he run a 101 bar? Did he look spectacular? Was he dynamic? Did I say wow? Yeah. Now, how good was the field? Something to think about. Yes, Bob Baffert created Derby winners out of Medina Spirit, who, by the way, there's an asterisk because he was DQ'd, who won on the front end. So he's in the books not as a Derby winner, but we know he crossed the finish line first, but he was DQ'd because of the bad blood circumstances. And then Authentic. Much has been discussed. Bob's reputation. And what John said, I love what John said. You can't beat who you can't catch. But one thing about Authentic, right? And I believe, if I don't have this wrong, I think that's the year Tis the Law was very prominent and was running huge all year. Authentic didn't win in May. That was the COVID year. Authentic won wire to wire in September. It was right around Labor Day. Changes the whole dynamic of a racehorse at 3, putting on a big show in the first Saturday in May as opposed to September. So there's an asterisk there. There's an asterisk with Medina Spirit, finishing first but was DQ'd, and there's an asterisk with Authentic. But obviously that doesn't change the brilliance that is Bob Baffert, because let's look at American Pharaoh and Justify. All right? American Pharaoh was a monster. It's a monster. Justify, I have a very clear memory of all his races. Now, I like Justify. Triple Crown winner. I am not saying anything negative about him. However, Justify, in my eyes, was definitely aided by a soupy, sloppy track at the Kentucky Derby and a soupy, sloppy track at the Preakness. Then he ran his best race at the Belmont. But is it an asterisk? No, he was the best horse. And Justify violated, me being a historian purist, he violated what I feel I need. And John made a great point on his show. By the way, let me take a time out and say, if you didn't see John's full deep dive on this race, the Arkansas Derby and the Florida Derby, after you watch this show, go on to Past the Wire TV and watch John's show too. So John talked about the dosage index, which was used to be in the 80s and 90s, something that was a necessity. I don't really follow that anymore, but I'm old school when it comes to saying a horse needs to be established or at least run as a juvenile. The sun's getting here, it's changed. Run as a juvenile to be a true Kentucky Derby horse. Now, Justify was the exception. Actually, he broke the Apollo curse that lasted what? Not 10 years, not 40 years, but 100 years. That's how prominent that statistic is for a horse to, run as a juvenile for him to win the Kentucky Derby. But American Pharaoh was just a beast, again, with Bob Baffert. And Justify deserves the credit too. But like I said, I think he was aided by those sloppy tracks. So without me running off base, let's continue to talk about Cornucopian here. Lots of hype. Yes, he's fast, very fast. But it was one race over the track. He ran a huge triple-digit buyer. I didn't officially check the Thoroughgraph, but I would take an educated guess that, man, that race he probably ran a 2, maybe a 2 1/4, 2 1/2. And if he goes forward, he's going to be a handful. However, if you reference horses like this another time, in terms of hype, I went back to 2021. This wasn't Bob Baffert. I believe this was, what did I put in my note? Let me just find it here. John Sadler. John Sadler had Rock Your World. Rock Your World looked brilliant, winning his maiden special debut and his second start on the turf. And then he drilled everybody running like the wind blows in a Santa Anita Derby, stretching out and switching to the dirt. So now 3 races in, he's running in the Kentucky Derby. Unbeaten, he drew the 15 hole. You know what I said to myself? Excuse me. This is a golden opportunity for this horse to be overwhelmed, not only by his post position, but the whole magnitude of Derby Day. And sure enough, he'd broken a bunch, was squeezed, and what I put down here in my note, from the 15th hole, he ran 18th. Never a factor. He was bet down to 9-2 that day. It wasn't Bob. It was John Sadler. But it was the same type of hype. Now, maybe I'm going a little forward to myself because we're not talking about the Kentucky Derby. But what I'm trying to emphasize here is, and that was a similar scenario. And even that hype carried on because, Rock Your World that year went on to the Belmonte Stakes. And again, I shorted him. I knew he'd be an underlay. And I tossed him. I knew he wasn't going to get the distance. And that race, Mr. Sette made a big score on Essential Quality and Hot Rod Charlie in the exacta. So I guess what I'm trying to emphasize here is the hype. Cornucopian could easily break from the 9 hole, get the lead, and never look back. And if that's what's going to happen, he's going to have to do this with you having tickets, what could be, because of hype, could be somewhere in the area of, 6 to 5 even money. And at the same time, you're going to get a horse like Sandman, who I spoke so much about. If you don't remember what I said, go back, rewind, and listen to it again. Who to me, is going to be an overlay. And Cold Battle, who's not as fast as Cornucopian, and he will never be, but he has heart. He's going to get money because of his success. And there are some other contenders in this race who I talked about, like Flavian Pratt, with Publisher, the maiden, who's winless, but I feel is a strong contender in the race. So what am I going to do with Cornucopian? I can't be confident in saying he's going to do what he's capable of doing in his second start. Race over the track, major plus. Dynamic speed, obviously, clearly talented. But body of work means a lot to me. And what I described about Sandman and his strides, how he eats up ground, and the unfortunate circumstances of his trips and breaks, and all I said about Publisher, and all I said about First Division. I'm not saying Cornucopian is going to be off the board, but if he doesn't go out and just blitz him and go wire to wire, and he's got everybody cheering in the crowd, and if he makes it to the Kentucky Derby with a big win, remember this show. Remember what I said about, what's his name? Rock Your World. Because you're getting a 1 month head start. So if Cornucopia wins this race, you're going to have an abundance of hype. Just remember what I said about the St. Anita Derby winner, Rock Your World, and what happened to him in the Kentucky Derby. Okay? Easier said than done. Yes, does Bob have a reputation, a fabulous Hall of Fame trainer for putting horses on the lead and just saying goodbye? You can't beat who you can't catch. But in this field, if he beats me, he beats me. I'm probably going to lose all my tickets because my precise order of finish, and believe me, I'm giving him because his speed, and he's going to make his presence felt up into the stretch. I'm putting Cornucopian third. And if I'm drawing the picture right, Sandman and Flavian Pratt, the Publisher, pass him. And that puts me in a position to say I am going 6, 3, 9, 4, 8, 2, 7 in terms of a lengthy, precise order. Horses who I feel are good enough to win this race would be, of course, my top 3, Sandman, Publisher, and Cornucopian. Now, my fourth choice, the 4, Best Friend Rocket, for all the reasons I spoke about, and First Division, Kenny McPeak with BJ Hernandez up. If there was a calamity and my top 3, as I described them, for whatever reason, didn't fire, including Cornucopian, then those horses can move up. But I like them more so in the deeper gimmicks underneath. An exciting race. There you have it, the Geo Sette Arkansas Derby. A few more takeaways and things to look forward to. First things first, like I mentioned, few things. If you didn't see John Stetton's deep dive on this race, the Arkansas Derby and the Florida Derby, at the conclusion of watching this, go to Past the Wire TV and find John's show. And it'd be pretty cool because you could compare our thoughts on this particular race. In terms of the Florida Derby, no show from me, but something rather majestic on Past the Wire, probably being released tomorrow night. I still have more work to do tonight and tomorrow. I'll be submitting my final 14 race, 10 stake handicap to Past the Wire. It'll be available on Past the Wire. My full card, precise order handicap. You know what? Gulfstream Park begins at 11:30 in the morning on Saturday. 11:30 in the morning. The pick 5, I believe, The early pick 5 concludes at like 1:30. So you got action all day long. And of course, you got the 14 races at Oaklawn. So stay tuned for that. If you haven't joined John's Kentucky Derby seminar, which he don't only just cover the Kentucky Derby. Of course, he goes over the prominent undercard that day. Invaluable information for you. And one thing on tab, I'll plug track and trips as well. If you're not a track and trip member, why not? If you want to be more successful, why wouldn't you load yourself with an arsenal of very informative information, just like you get when you are engaged in my full card handicaps? Because remember, in the full card handicap, I provide my win probability percentage along with my precise order, and I fully elaborate in writing generally my top 3 in every one of the races. What else? One more thing. Next week, as I mentioned, you get the Santa Anita Derby, the Wood Memorial, and we have Keeneland Spring opening up, so you're going to get the Bluegrass Stakes. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to provide a 9-race handicap, taking a pick 3, all stakes pick 3 from each of those 3 tracks and combining them into one, because I know you're all going to be in action on April 5th. And then all that will be left after that on the Derby trial will be the Lexington Stakes, which I believe is the week after. Let me check it out. Yes, at Keeneland on April 12th, the Lexington, and then we'll be 3 weeks away from the first Saturday in May. All right, with that, thank you for watching. Any comments? Come on, ask. I will go on to the comments and I will answer any one of your questions. If you have a comment in general, share it. Hoping they're not going to be some negative comments, but I've had a few because there's always going to be haters, and we all know who the haters are, but that's okay, because when you're confident in your ways and you have a measure of success, you're always going to have someone that is disapproving of the path that you're on. So with that said, thanks for watching. I hope to see you guys soon enough on the next show. And you know what? Let's go get them.
Hey, Sure Bet Coffee. Put that giddy up in your cup. That giddy up in your cup. Sure Bet Coffee.
Giddy up, giddy up, giddy up. The legend himself, Frankie Dettori. Ciao, Frankie. Tutto a posto.
Tutto a posto. Yes, that's a good start. So you haven't lost your Italian.
You're watching Past the Wire TV, presented by Am Wager.
Tracking trips at Past the Wire. There is no better time than now to join and ride with this clan. We'll be your second set of expert trained eyes. We ain't gonna buy you a fish. Sure, we'll give you some, but more importantly, we'll show you how to fish and make you a better. CAWs, sharks in the water, no problem. will go against anybody, and we have the track record to prove it. Big days, big pools, and select days all year long. We'll outplay them all. Looking for an ace? You're in the right place. Want to find that diamond? Be with us. Want to know more? Just ask a member or visit us at PassTheWire.com and check out the Tracking Trips page. Nobody does it better.
And here's Tama in the final stages. The Santa Anita Derby goes to Tama. It's Tama, absolutely terrific, winning Malibu by 4 widening lengths.
Remember, the older you get, the better you get. Unless you're a banana.
It's The Wire TV, your #1 source for horse racing news and interviews, handicapping analysis, betting insights, and more. Pass the Wire TV covers the biggest races at the best tracks.
Garnet and Luis Saez to win the Belmonte Stakes at Saratoga.
The Grey Wizard is absolutely flying. Champagne won. The Grey Wizard. Oh, it's very close. Leave it to the judge.
Like, share, and subscribe to Pass the Wire TV. Nobody does it better.
Blood. That makes you related. Loyalty. That makes you family. Nobody does it better.